Certification compliance to open meeting laws.
This meeting has been noticed to the public and news media as required by section 19.84 of the Wisconsin statutes.
Thank you. Meeting agenda is set. Next item is public comment. Linda?
Linda Zilmer, 902 Holly Hill Lane, Birchwood, Edgewater property taxpayer. I have a couple of different items on my public comment today. One is regarding agenda number 9A, ambulance billings, or just ambulance billings to Washburn County towns that receive services. Ever since Sawyer County has gone to full-time ambulance service, at that transition, it was noted that Washburn County towns were paying nothing. And I don't think it was even a committee or a board decision for the formula that was adopted and has been in use ever since. Washburn County towns pay significantly less than Sawyer County towns. And every year I bring it up. I think other county board supervisors bring it up, and it's been kicked down the road every single year. So one request is to please put that on a future agenda item fairly soon so that it can be addressed this year, as well as the fact that Edgewater taxpayers are assessed or allocated ambulance service and they receive their service from Birchwood. So it's really truly not a countywide ambulance service, and Edgewater taxpayers pay for the service they get as well as Sawyer County. The second item was the 2023 budget process. As I watched it this year, I understand there are new people, both supervisors and staff wise. But I mean, when it came down to the county board, there wasn't even a dollar amount included in the motion to adopt the budget. I know going back to look at the process within Sawyer County, just from a agenda and material standpoint, it's difficult to piece together processes from prior years, but it's possible. And also I would recommend to go to the Barron County website and look at their budget packet. Everything is included, including a timeline, and they follow it. So please start that process earlier this year as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else have public comment? Is there anybody online? Number 7, approval of the minutes of the previous meeting.
I will be approving.
I'll second that.
Motion by Mr. Duffy, second by Ms. Hassel to approve as presented. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Number 8, Treasury Department update. Is Jadine online?
Janine's on.
Good morning, Jadine.
Good morning, good morning. I'm not seeing the sales tax report, but maybe it didn't get it.
Probably after Mike uploaded this one, so.
Okay, so not a whole lot to report here. We are just continuing to keep busy, new staff, busy preparing for the upcoming tax season.
Are any of the taxes out yet?
We have some municipalities that are out. Not all of them have been printed, but we're not working on that. It's Land Records that is working on that.
That's correct.
Some municipalities have mailed theirs. Others, they have not been completed yet, but as soon as they are, they will get in the mail. The deadline is the 19th of December.
Good. Yes.
Chairman, I got a question for Janine and Andy. Andy, is there a surplus of money somewhere that we should have invested or something to get a higher interest rate? I heard interest rates are up a little bit.
We'll talk about that down the agenda.
Oh.
Anybody else have any questions for Jadine? Hearing none, thank you for your time, Jadine.
Thank you.
Number 9, ambulance billing summary update. Is that Mike?
It is, yep. Wait till them pulls it up. So I was able to get a little better data for the last 3 years to look at compared to how we're doing this year. And what I did then is I compared the months of May through October. October's last month, we have the new company for records, and April is when we switched over, and they did back billing from January, so that month was really skewed. So I looked at those 6 months. Um,
Mike,
and-
do you have a microphone by you?
Yep, it's fine.
Thank you.
So I averaged those 6 months for each year and then did a comparison between how we're doing this year versus the previous 3 months. And then there are 6 things that I looked at: number of calls, the amount billed, the amount collected, percent collected, the amount billed per call, and the amount collected per call. So I've got graphs for each of those. And then if you want to go to the next one, please. So these are the average calls for months, again, for May through October, the last 3 years this year, and then I did an average of 19 through 21, which you can see there. And the first thing that sticks out, obviously, is the calls are way down. And it's kind of been a trend, it looks like the last 3 years, but really took a drop this year. So, you know, when we look at revenue, we have to take that into consideration, that just aren't the calls that we've had in the past. The next slide then shows what we billed per month. So the nice thing is, even though the calls are way down, the billing isn't, it's down from last year, but not as significantly as I would have thought. So, and I know that the pricing was adjusted for this year, and that does reflect that a little bit. The next slide then shows our collections per month. And again, even when you look at that trajectory we saw in the calls, the drop in the actual what we collected is down even less than the billings. So I believe we're doing a good job with our billings now. The next slide, this is where you can start seeing some good news. So our percent collected is over 40%, and it was over 41 last year, but the prior 2 years was down a little bit, and we're exceeding the 3-year average by about 4 points too. So I think we are doing a good job in the right direction with this thing. And then the final slide has a little combination of charts. And this is where it's really good news, I think. You look at the dollars billed and collected per call, and the bill is way up, and collected is way up. So, you know, the prices were adjusted, but we're also seeing a higher amount for payment come in. So it's very early. When we switched, they said we would need at least a year to really have comparable numbers. So I took what I felt was a very comparable apples to apples as much as I could by looking at those months. And while calls are down, I think we're doing a good job generating revenue from the calls. Any questions?
Did a good job putting them graphs together. Let's understand it. Thank you. Do we still have 2 chase cars out there?
Jump trucks, they're not, we do, but they're not always, they're not up and running as often as they used to be. Because we have the 2 ambulances, and part of the reason for the reduction of calls is we're not getting as many transfers. When we have an ambulance outside, then we might have the power truck or the chase truck up and running more often.
Okay.
We're not getting as many transfers out of the county as we used to.
How is the hospital do that? I mean, why aren't we calling our ambulance to transfer people instead of Great Divide or whatever does?
It's at the hospital's discretion,
Right,
so
so let's bring them in.
we've been out there to talk to them. But at the end of the day, it comes down to whoever the ER, the ambulance, or the person at the hospital makes the phone call.
Mr. Sleater? Pardon? Well, it works both ways, because if you run these transfers, you know, we're wearing out our ambulances. I mean, there's a give and take. Mr. Sleater?
Yeah, can. The dollar amount that we take in average in any given year versus the cost of what we're spending on that business department. That would be very interesting to me. We would need to adjust some costs. I know we're never going to collect 100%. It's just impossible. But I would like to see that comparison between actual cost for every department and what they're bringing in. See. And Ms. Gerber is right, we do need to get moving on what we're charging in Washburn County townships.
Yes. Other questions? Other things you want to educate us with?
Well, the ambulance doesn't break even. No, we have a special levy just for the ambulance
I
service.
know, I wonder just how much that is.
Moving on. Number 10, second courtroom expenses, discussion, possible action. Bring us up to breast, please.
I don't know, as far as the action, I mean, at this point. The expenses of the second courtroom, we know we've increased in this year's budget. The utility cost and cleaning costs, those types of things, kind of just the operation of the building itself. As far as I'm anticipating we're gonna see some requests for additional expenses once the second judge is in place. But at this point, we don't have those. I'm talking with Judge Yackel. He's gonna wait until we have a second judge before we have those discussions.
Okay.
Just as a general update, updated the public works last night as far as the timeline. Still on track to have it turned over on March 10th. We'll have about a week and a half to transition from the current courtroom to the new one. And then they'll start working on the current courtroom to remodel that, along with the chambers, judges' chambers area will be remodeled. The east entrance most likely won't be available till May. So we get the parking lot finished, so all traffic will still come in off of Main Street and then have to access the other side, the new building through the entrance, kind of to the east of where the current courtroom is.
Tour.
What's that?
Tour.
Tour, yes, sorry. I'll get information out to Lynn with the board meeting agenda, but next week before the board meeting, it'll be open and we'll be able to do tours. The construction supervisor will take 4 or 5 people through at a time to see what it looks like in the expanded area.
You know, once we get the second courtroom done, is that actually gonna correct the jail problem? As it happened, we had the second
It should,
courtroom today.
I'm not gonna promise any that it will, but it should help because it'll move people through the court system faster that are currently waiting in jail to be,
But we have now, what, 40 people out of the county?
20s, low 20s. Yep, all of the female, we've had consistently 20 outside the county. It's just that now it's all females
Yeah.
that are outside the county.
Yeah, we hope it solves that problem. but-
Yeah, and we looked at these numbers in public safety and at CJCC. But roughly we run 100 inmates a month. 20 of them are housed outside the county or females. But of that 100, close to half or 40% are pre-sentence.
Yeah,
And then you have 10 to 20 that are probation holds, and then you have 10 to 20, usually 10 to 15 that are actually sentenced individuals.
Mr. Schumer.
Right, and that was a comment I was gonna make at CJCC. They mentioned over half are sitting pre-sentence. Meaning waiting for a court date or waiting for, so that should.
Yep.
I'd like to look at that number as the second courtroom opens, that number falls and it does address our jail population.
hopefully, yeah.
Yeah.
And
That's what we
usually,
did.
So does not doing crime.
usually
Sometimes that delay is not the judge's problem, it's the attorney's problem. They delay it because they want, more time, so.
I think
But I
that's,
hope it corrects.
I think that's a factor too, is I don't know how prevalent it is, but sometimes there's a hard time finding attorneys for public defenders. There's not enough of them to go around, so sometimes that's the holdup, that those cases, people who are handling those cases have high caseloads, so they are
Yeah.
pushed out.
Does the state help us pay for any additional cost for the employees that, because they, is my understanding, required the second judge, but they don't help with any of those costs?
No, their only cost would be the court reporter.
Okay,
Like if we have,
And the judge.
The judge.
and then the judge, yes.
Mm-hmm.
But judicial assistant, court security, those will all fall onto us.
Okay.
They also don't allow us any additional capacity in the the levy to account for that either. But they do take more of the Hooker Court fees every year.
We should negotiate that.
That is one of the platforms from WCA, and I know our county execs administrators group, that's one of the, with going into the next state budget and the additional revenue that's down in Madison. There's a couple, one is to, pull more money back that we're sending down there. But if it's it really is a state court system, it's having the state pay more of their share of it.
Other questions? Hearing none, we'll move on to number 11, 2022 budget actual update.
Now let's talk about some highlights here. For the year, we're doing very well. I ran this on November 30th, so we're 11 out of the 12 months. And so if I look at, do a calculation, we should be at about 91.67% of revenues and expenses. And what you're gonna see is that we're doing well on both. It looks like when you look at the general fund, that we're running a little bit under, but if I take out that planned fund balance draw that we were going to do of 1.285 million, then we're actually above. And I don't believe we're gonna have to touch that draw at all. The expenses too, even if I calculate that in there, we're still under for the year for expenses, so we're really doing well on the general fund. Just a couple of the revenues are lagging a little bit, which I think for stuffage is typical for that to lag a little bit, so it's not quite the percentage we want it to be, but it will catch up. And then ambulance is a little behind, but if we look at that already, the calls are way down, so that probably is going to finish a little behind the budget. On the expense side,
What about health and human services?
Yeah, I'm just gonna comment.
what's that?
Health
Oh,
and
yep, I'm
service
getting to
meeting,
that.
Mike.
Okay.
Okay.
On the expense side, we're doing well overall. I think we're at 87% or something like that. 85% when I take out that transfer, because all of the transfer that was coming from fund balance was going to special purpose funds. And if we don't need to do that draw, then we're under budget. We're at about 85% net of that, and the revenues are at 95% net of that. So both revenue and expense are doing well. Health and Human Services, we're in a good position there too. If I back out, right now our revenues are 82% of budget, but if I back out that 1.275 was going directly to HHS, then we're at 95.29% of revenues have come in. And expenses right now are at 75%, so I do not, unless something drastic happens, we're not going to need to do that transfer from general, or from fund balance to general fund, ultimately to HHS. So then, we're really.
Mike, at HHS meeting just a couple days ago, they mentioned there were a couple of out of county placements that had taken place that they were concerned about. That they thought would stay there through the year.
To the end
So
of
just
this
so you're
year.
aware, yep.
Yeah, and that'll be a hit, but for 1 month, that's not gonna blow the budget. And the highway department was the last one I wanted to talk to. Both revenues and expenses are running a little bit under. Revenues would, because some of that stuff is claims, there's always gonna be a way than that, but the good news is, expenses are running a little under too. So overall, we're in very good shape for this time of year.
Good.
We're starting to work on closing entries for the year. It's a little early, but we're getting a start on that and doing some of the transfers already.
Questions for Mike?
It's just one comment, Jim. The bills you had sent to the tribe, with the Ray for those three, the economic development, UW extension and CJCC. I had met with Andy, they just want those folks to come in and speak to the governing board just to kind of justify and rationalize their money.
Sure.
So we got those scheduled correctly, or gonna be scheduled?
You got the one scheduled and
Justice Boyne's coming in to talk to us about the CJCC and then UW extension, those two folks, right, Andy?
Yep.
But the economic development amount, comes every year. And the tribe and county split that from the casino, out of gaming dollars,
Okay.
so. I appreciate those invoices
Alright.
and the people coming in and making sure that they're talking about and justifying that money. So,
We just send some more bills out there.
yeah.
Just the forestry, so Greg just had an update this week. So they had a big November. And based on the large sales that are being cut right now, it'll have to be a big month. I think we're about 300, say 350 short of the budget projection, but he's pretty confident based on what's been cut and what they've already invoiced that they'll hit the 185 that's in the budget.
Forestry's always lagging behind, but that's just the nature of the beast. Okay. Thank you, Mike. Moving on, number 12. 2023 to 2025 banking service request.
Yeah, so our current relationship for banking services expires on December 31st. So they put out an RFP to 5 local banks. Johnson, Shell, Associated, Branson, and Triple Valley. Some of those banks should respond. And the proposals were all wonderfully written. Each of them would be able to meet our banking needs without problem. Another thing that I asked for was their community involvement, because when we put our stamp on something that we business relationship with, they're kind of representing us, so we're putting our name behind them. So I want to make sure that they're community oriented. They all have wonderful volunteer programs and actually give people paid time off to volunteer and support financial and everything. So each of the proposals I received was very solid. Each was also very different. So it did take a little while to put it together and get what I could for an apples to apples calculation. What I really focused on then is what we're going to be earning on interest on an anticipated balance in our accounts, which I did adjust for what we're going to see later is our investment policy. So I did adjust for that. And based the calculation down about a $5 million to $8 million, which is less than we typically carry. But if we diversify our investments a little, that's more like what it'll be at. So then what I did is I looked at their interest-bearing structure, and 3 of them tied it to the Fed funds rate, which right now is skyrocketing. The last 2 years was not good at all. So what I did in my calculations, I went back 5 years. So that I felt I could get a fair assessment of what we would get from each bank. The ones tied to Fed funds had different deductions from that rate, and the final bank actually gave us a flat interest rate over the 3-year commitment. So I analyzed each of them. I looked at the summary of the 5 years on average, what our interest return would be. I looked at a projection for next year as if nothing changed. Like I said, the Fed rate is high right now. So I looked at that, casted forward. And then the final one I looked at is 18-19 alone, because that was one of our last, what I've called normal years before we get things shut down. So it really took 3 factors, looked at those, looked at the interest return on each of them. And then finally, 2 of the banks waived fees as long as we had a minimum balance in there. And one of those banks, the minimum balance did not earn interest. The other bank, 3/4 of it earned interest. So they had a little amount that doesn't earn interest. And those are just to cover fees. So it's just different ways of calculating and covering their fees. The final 2 actually had their fees laid out right on there. So in looking at all of that, and like I said, each of them will be fine to work with. We've actually dealt with most, if not all of them in the past. When I calculated the 3 different ways of interest earning, subtracted any fees to come to a net, Branson would be my recommendation for banking services. We have worked with them in the past. We currently have accounts with them now. We have accounts with most of the banks, which is one thing I'd like to move away from. I think when you do an RFP, we want to We're thinking with the one that was there. Keep the ground. We've worked with them, services have been fine, it's been great. So. Don't have
Which
any
bank did you say?
hesitation. What's that? Branson.
Okay.
The old people's, right?
Correct.
Okay.
They gave us the best. It was close, all of them.
Questions, concerns? Yes,
Where's our from the city in Branson? Making any money or didn't the second half come now? We obligated, but we
Yes.
haven't spent it.
Right. Yeah, we have it all on hand.
Earning interest for us? Some?
Some, not much.
That actually,
That stays. in
that-
our fund.
yes, it's a separate fund. That
we
actually
haven't
might
spent
be invested in West right now. Along with our bond issue. For the
What about the opioid money that's come?
That's just in the bank account.
So this election, I didn't need to approve.
it's, or do we?
I think it'd be good to put it on the
Oh,
record.
okay, I was staying corrected. Well, make that motion, girl.
I'll make the motion to go with Mr. Markin's recommendation of Branson Bank for our banking.
Motion by Ms. Cecil, second by Mr. Schleter. Any further discussion?
Do you want us to use that clicker?
Yes, let me get her open.
I think you should give me that tweets.
It's, your clickers are open.
Good to go.
Yep, you can vote. Okay. There's 5 greens, which means it passed 5-0.
So motion carries. Thank you. Number 13, county investment policy. Consideration.
So this is somewhat related to the banking services, and goes to so we have Fern's investment policy. And I think this really has come to light the last couple months, just put on the radar because, you know, a year ago, probably have some money in CDs and or in the even the state pool or WISC was less, 1% or less. There just wasn't any return. But things have changed now. So the WISC is the fund that PMA operates. So like our construction bond money that we bonded for until we need it, it sits in WISC. And then they distributed it to us. That's at it's over 4%. I can't remember what it was this week. It was probably 4.1 or something like that. In the state pool is over 4%. So there's real return on money right now. In talking with council as well as some of my colleagues, a number of the other counties have an investment policy. So using what was already out there, working with council, we put together a policy for consideration. There is guidelines within statute as to the things that local governments can put their money into and the things they, it outlines what they can. So that you're not putting it into crypto or, it has to be in securities that are backed and have assets pledged. So just the scope of the investment policy applies to the activities of the county with regard to investing the assets, including all funds, new funds, unless specifically exempted. We do commingle our funds, so like our opioid money is in there with our ARPA dollars. I mean, we have to segregate them in our own accounts, but we might commingle them when they're invested, including levy dollars until they're used. We have a operator or general fund reserve, so that's managed with all of our other funds. The general objectives are to protect the money, but maintain the liquidity, generate a return on investment as well, and where possible, invested for the betterment of the local economy, or within the state of Wisconsin. There's a standards of care, prudence. It's the prudent person rule. which is outlined in statutes. That means that in the context of managing the overall portfolio, the prudent person standard states that investments shall be made with judgment and care under circumstances that then prevailing, which persons of prudence, discretion, and intelligence exercise in the management of their own affairs, not for speculation, but for investment, considering the probable safety of the capital as well as the probable income to be derived. So that comes right out of the statutes as far as how the individuals or entities responsible should act. There's ethics and conflict of interest, that if you're involved with the investing of county dollars, you have to disclose if you have any conflicts of interest. Generally, you don't want to, you're not gonna, if you have personal investments, you're not gonna have the same individual you work with to invest the county's money. Might be the same firm sometimes, especially in smaller communities, but you generally don't want to be using the same individual. The delegation of authority, and this is where I think this is a little bit of a change. Traditionally, under the treasurer's statutory duties, the treasurer, in some places historically, was the individual that handled the county's money and determined how it was invested. Whether it was put in CDs or left in the savings and checking accounts or in the state pool. This policy adopted by the board would authorize the creation of an investment committee to manage the county's fund. In here would be the county administrator, the county treasurer, the finance director, and either the county board chair or a designee would be on that committee. Then the finance director would be responsible for all transactions undertaken, establish a system of controls to regulate the activities of the subordinates. Also be responsible to give the finance committee or the admin committee, and thereby the board, reports on a monthly or quarterly basis where it was determined, so you can see where the money is invested and what the returns are, and so you can see how the county's money is being managed. It also allows for that committee to engage with an investment advisor to help direct the investments of the county. We essentially have one already with PMA. They're doing this on our behalf, but that's really right now as part of our, well, as part of having money in WIS and as part of them being our bond counsel or finance advisors. Authorized financial institutions and depositories. This refers to the banking services. We just made a motion to determine the official depository for the county. And then the county finance director would be authorized to approve the opening of any account fiduciary in the name of the county. That's, I know, probably historically again, and especially in smaller counties with maybe not as many controls. There was a time, I think, when every department or every program would run and open their own bank account. You really need to have one central point or person that's authorized to do that and authorized to use the county's tax number to open up accounts. And then this gets into the permitted investments. Again, they have to be made by statutes that govern local governments in Wisconsin as to the things they can invest into. You can put money into time deposits. That's essentially putting it into a savings or checking account in any bank, trust. Repurchase agreements that are collateralized by bonds or securities. Bonds or securities issued or guaranteed as to principal and interest by the federal government or by a commission. So federal bonds. Bonds or securities of any other county, city, drainage district, technical college. Put money into that. Securities of no load investment trust with portfolio limited to consistent with the following. Bonds and securities issued by the federal government. Bonds that are guaranteed as to principal and interest by the federal government. Purchase agreements that are fully collateralized by bonds or securities. The state of Wisconsin local government investment pool, which is for many governments probably the most popular place to put money to be managed, which right now is returning more than 4%. Any security denominated in US dollars matures, which may be tendered for purchase at the option of the holder within not more than 5 years. Continues on to describe these. The rating it has to have by Standard & Poor's and or Moody's. And then prohibited investments, any investment not included in section above. Permitted investments as well as inverse floaters and any security that can result in zero interest, accrual, and held to maturity. So that section is largely driven by statute, which already outlines the things that the county can put the money in. So it needs to be collateralized and secured. Typically, you want another government entity securing your money because they have the same taxing authority we do that. It's hard for them to default on an obligation because of that. Then it gets into the legalese of depository collateralization requirements. Safekeeping and custody. And this is a lot of finance and legal language that are in all the agreements because that's where the attorneys put them. Safekeeping and custody has to do with delivery versus payment. How the money is invested in trades and marketable securities will be executed on a delivery versus payment basis. So that the securities are deposited in the county before they release the funds. So there's no speculative investing. Or third-party safekeeping, we invest with PMA, that they would do the same thing. Internal controls, finance director is responsible for establishing and maintaining an internal control structure to ensure that the county's assets are protected from loss, theft, or misuse. Provides reasonable assurance that these objectives are met. And then the county treasurer shall be a co-administrator in all county financial accounts as part of the internal control structure. And again, that goes to their statutory duty to fulfill that role as being an elected official. And then talks about diversification of the investments, partly for safety, but also to make sure that we have, just as you would in your own personal portfolio, spread it around to leverage or to hedge on risk.
The weather.
Could be.
So we just need to bring this to the full board.
I don't know, I'm waiting that. I wonder if Tweed's supposed to put together the committee for that, or you got the general pieces started there.
For this investment policy? Why would this can be good?
This would be a policy, this would be a new policy, so it would go to the policy should go to the board.
Yeah.
For approval.
Right, but it should be brought to the board from the committee.
Yeah,
This would be the committee of jurisdiction. Do we all have copies of that?
That's just gonna say,
yeah, I thought it was in the packet, so you don't.
And I thought it was too, and I'm not seeing it in any of the versions, but things have been coming in left and right.
I'd like to see it.
So can we review it and revisit it in January? Does that have to come to the board next week?
It can wait till January.
Okay.
Yeah, there's no rush to, I mean, the only rush is that I think at this point, we either need. Our money is not in the best place for it to be generating a return for us right now, right? But that.
This is kind of scary that we've never had a policy on how we invest.
I'm assuming up to this point, it's always been the treasurer, it's just taken care of. I don't know, I mean, since I've been here, I've not seen any reports to the committee. I don't know if you used to get anything showing how your money was being handled or.
No, but I'm sure it's a thing we'll have in the future.
Yeah.
All eyes on you.
Well, we question that, right? The bulk of the money comes what, first week of February, end of January, right, when tax statements are due?
Then, July, August.
Right, the second statement.
Yeah, I mean, you need to have, and we have,
But I think there's a lot of these folks that pay in full, right, at the end of January.
Yeah,
yeah, that money comes to the township though. And then we settle with the towns. So yeah, there's February.
there's dates, yeah, it's
Yeah.
February 15th or something like that.
Yeah. But just to think, Mike, what was the general fund at the budget hearing?
The fund balance.
Yes,
almost 8 million.
So that's foolish for us not to have something in place now to try to capture them.
Especially when you're looking at real money, 4% or more, you're saying?
Yeah. And I Mike probably has a little better idea, but I don't know that I have a clear. I can't, if I can clearly explain as to where that money is right now, how much it's generating for us.
That's,
Can I interject for just a moment?
yes, go ahead, Jenny.
Okay, so we have, I believe it's about 10 million at LGIP right now, so that is earning interest. We have just under 1 million at PMA. So those are, but we have a significant amount still at Franson.
What's the interest rates on them? Are you,
So PMA and LGIP is around that 3.5%.
okay,
And that is basically through October is the rate that I could give you right now.
okay,
Franson is about, I believe it's 0.11 at the top of my head.
couple things. Janine, I don't know exactly how things work in your office, but for an example, at the town level, when we take this tax money in, we do a settlement with the county, which is fine. And then we try to keep it in a higher interest rate that we can receive until each month when we need it. So example, in February, we write the checks, we know how much the checks are, we pull that much out and put it in the account. Is there anything similar to that in the county level? Or that you can relate
Yeah,
to?
so basically the one of the reasons why there is such a large amount in LGIP is after we did receive the settlement, I had moved that money over there.
Okay. So the question is really for the committee is if we formed this, if I understand it right, the committee to oversee that, that should move quickly, I would say, to capture all the interest money we can. My thoughts, yes.
Is there any reason not to proceed at this point? I think we've got the information here. We've got very competent people talking to us. I suggest we move on and take care of this.
So I'm asking.
Well, I don't think there needs to be a separate committee, just
Well,
to say that, yes, we want a policy so that, I mean, it covers everybody.
I got the impression, maybe I misunderstood what you said, that they wanted a separate committee for that. But maybe I
In
misunderstood,
the policy, it does establish an investment committee.
which we could have as this committee or not.
You could, yeah, you could have it as this committee.
That's what I'm thinking.
Okay. Well, just
Because
want
they're not
This
clarification.
is our financial
Right.
brain trust,
Well, I want the clarification.
right? Mr. Right.
So,
If you, I mean, I think the. I mean, the policy as drafted, if you want that, you can just use that as your. We really wouldn't need to adopt anything if this committee wants to be the oversee the investment. You just follow that as your guidelines for making the investment.
okay,
But I would rather not make that until we see the documents. I mean, to say that we're gonna be okay with that without seeing the documents. So if we could just table this until
Yeah,
January.
no, what I'm saying is that this committee is gonna be an investment committee. Half of that was about the investment committee, how that would operate, because you'd be assigning them the duties. So the only part in here then that really applicable is the, how you would invest. And that's already statutory language. So I think tabling it's fine. We'll just have, we would pull apart the investment policy to give you just the guidelines for invest, how the monies are invested.
yes,
So in January, this committee could approve it, send it to us, in January we'll approve it, and it's a go. Before the money comes.
So if we could get that, so that we can review it by the next finance meeting in January, that would be my proposal.
What do you think, John?
Fine with that. I mean, you read us what the policy was, right? And you reviewed it, so
Yeah.
you're asking just to see that hard copy.
Just so that we have that, so we can clearly see instead of
Yep.
what he read. I think that that's just more ethical and transparent to have that.
I would agree with that part. yeah. Doesn't sound like you're doing future markets and swaps and things like that.
No.
No fun.
Okay, so then we just bring it back next month.
Thank you for looking into that. Can't believe we didn't have something already.
But there might be a couple of things out there that we still don't have. All right, that take care of that. Moving on. Number 14. Native,
Yeah, I was just gonna give a quick update. I don't know if we've really talked about it or if you were aware. So there was a US Appeals Court decision probably back in September, October time period related to the property taxation of Native American properties. As you're probably all aware, tribal land is not taxable. Probably there's been situations where tribal land has been sold to non-tribal entities. Then once it's sold, it goes on to the tax, the property gets assessed, it gets on the tax roll. Some of those properties have been repurchased by tribal members or by the tribe. And so there was a court case, against the state of Wisconsin, Department of Revenue from the LCO, Bad River, and Red Cliff tribes were involved. I think maybe not so much LCO, but one of the tribes up north has done a lot of purchasing back of that land.
But it was like a 3 or 4 tribal initiative.
So my concern when this came out, and this was initially must be the district court said that no, that land, if it's been on the tax roll, and assessed the tax when it's purchased by the tribe, it's still taxable, but the Court of Appeals now has gone the other way and said that that land is not taxable once it's repurchased by a tribal member or by the tribe. So my concern is that we're going to have a bunch of property that we were currently getting tax revenue on that is now not going to be any tax revenue coming. As best we can look at it so far in Sawyer County, for the townships that have been affected, when the land has been repurchased, the assessors have been setting it back to 0 already. So we shouldn't see a huge impact on our local taxes. That's not the case necessarily up at Bayfield and Ashland counties. They appear to have a little bit more of an issue that's going to affect their tax revenue at the county level. So I guess I was just going to update on that, but we're still looking into it because it's not really easy to go through the tax rolls and identify which pieces of land we're talking about.
Is anybody considering reappealing this?
If it would be the state, but it doesn't sound as if they are, because Department of Revenue has been issuing advisements to the towns and counties as to how it's going to be handled. I guess the other thing is normally the county has to settle up with the towns. But the advisement from the Department of Revenue is as a county, we're not responsible to pay anything back to the towns for tax revenue that we collect on these properties. Because normally if you're, somebody has a property, they get assessed, they don't pay their taxes, you still have to pay the township their portion of the taxes. And now we're not liable to do that anymore.
How far back do they go? So somebody repurchased it 10 years ago,
Yeah.
you go back 10 years?
Yeah, and
I don't understand, is there any retro?
well, I was talking to Mr. Slender about that last month, and he said he didn't, I don't remember him saying what the time period was, but there's a process they have to go through to file and get that tax revenue, be able to recover the tax revenue that they already paid in.
And Andy, this was on property within the reservation boundaries, correct?
I believe so. Yeah. Because that's why it's just primarily
That
the,
fell out of trust because it was sold to a non-native.
right,
And then a native or the tribe bought it back. So then it comes off the tax roll.
Because there was, I think, two, town of Hayward and town of Sand Lake or Bass Lake. Bass Lake. Those are the two townships that are mostly involved in Sarah County.
Hunter too.
Hunters involved.
Yeah.
Yeah,
There must not be as much in Hunter because I wouldn't.
it's up Highway H.
These are primarily residential homes.
We're just gonna call it property.
Just property.
Now, they resell it again, ping pong back and forth.
Right.
Well, at the same time, we can bill the LCO for our lost revenue, correct?
That's a good point.
So we are just trying to look into it and at this point, though, it doesn't appear as if we're gonna have a big loss in tax revenue because of it.
But we need to stay abreast of what's going on there.
Yeah.
Thank you for bringing it to our attention. What did that treaty of 1854 really say? Okay, moving on. Number 15, funds update, ARPA, opioid and LATCF.
ARPA funds are not much of an update there, just that we did get a request from Novato for the broadband grant that was approved in 2021. The project's been complete, so we're working through verifying the completion. They'll be sending us an invoice. We have a ARPA agreement for funds now. That before we disperse, they'll be signing off on, which essentially says that they're receiving ARPA funds and that we have some reporting requirements to the federal government and that they'll be cooperative to help us meet any obligations that the county has to report to the federal government, and they'll certify the project completion. We're also getting like from them the best for the map files for the project, and then the same information they provide to the state broadband office for verification to provide to us as well. Because I think the good part is that all of our ARPA broadband projects were also state funded, so we have some verification that the state's doing. And they'd be able to find that as well.
Novato and CenturyTel, those are the two that cover the county, or are there more?
There's more. I mean, there's more providers in that. We did not provide any funding to CenturyTel. Our broadband grants were approved for Mosaic, Novato, Bevcom.
Is that the, so CenturyTel in essence didn't qualify or doesn't cover enough of the county, or
Yeah.
They didn't request.
they didn't request?
Yep, I don't believe they received any state broadband grants for the county either.
That's what I'm on. I'm left out in the cold.
Yeah, I'm on two.
Okay,
They were invited.
we need Novato to buy that area or something.
Or to go into that area. And Novarato's gone into some.
I have that.
areas.
Okay.
You're coming down to below, you might be, disconnected.
Just this close.
Opioid funds, we did receive, prior to last meeting, we received our second disbursement, and now we just received part of the Janssen settlement. So I don't know the exact amount, but we have, I think, just a little over $65,000 opioid money that we received so far. We received everything we're supposed to get in 2022 now.
And then, so that builds interest until we figure out what we can use it on.
Yep.
Kind of like the other one.
Yep.
Yeah.
Then I'm just gonna leave these funding updates on here. Then the money that we received last month, something of I think a surprise. It's the local area and tribal consistency fund, which is a federal disbursement that was funded through one of the COVID or recovery bills at the federal level. It was based on the amount of federal land that you have in your area. So some counties that have very little receive 50,000. Those that receive have more acreage receive more money. It's based on the per diem amount we were already getting prior to this. We got a small per diem from the federal government that goes like to our, I think, search and rescue is where it's been allocated. But so our disbursement that we received half of is our total is $755,463.84. We received the first disbursement last month, half of it, and the other half in the spring. There is no. They'll probably, right. There will be some reporting, but there's not much for guidance on how you can use the funds. You can treat it as general revenue. But like, maybe one of the committees last month mentioned this. Most likely one-time money, so you're probably doing a one-time expense. You're not gonna wanna add positions or increase payroll or do any of those things, because you're not gonna have that money to use in the future.
I think Tweed missed the amount if you could.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry.
It's $100,000. 755, 463, and I think the tribe also is receiving a portion of this fund as well.
You're getting 100,000?
No, I'm kidding. We got
That's good.
He was joking.
the local area and tribal consistency fund. So
Yeah.
we will be getting 755,463.
Is there a time frame to obligate it and spend it or it's all gone?
Not that's been communicated, no.
Wow.
So we could just put it into something and build interest and then pay off our courthouse.
Yeah. exactly.
Always comes back to the courthouse.
Wow, great.
When do you anticipate that money's coming in?
I think April is when the second disbursement is supposed to come. We have the first half and set aside an account. And I guess, and since some of the people in the room, are the ones that have talked to me, I know there's been some talk about housing issues or things along those lines. This could potentially be seed money for that type of a project too.
Good.
Just have to get people that have time to build.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah,
Oh, Claire.
Carbon tax.
carbon credit. It's not a
Yeah.
tax.
Yeah, we're still 2 years away from seeing a check for that.
Yeah.
After last month's meeting, the agreements were signed and now we're just waiting for the kickoff meeting with a new in our forestry office, because the next step will be the due diligence. It will start.
But the contract's all inside.
Yep.
I keep on thinking about number 13, and I wonder if I'm missing something. If we had a finance committee that had the authority over that, or whatever you care to call it. I also want to see it in writing, but why couldn't we still put that on the full board and have it active, so if we need activity, we can do it already in January?
So we'll just go to the full board in
You're
January.
gonna approve it in January and go.
Okay. I should just leave it alone then. I keep thinking we should move it now.
But I don't think you can get it on next week's agenda.
Yeah, you can.
Oh, you can. Oh, got it. Still would like to see it before.
Yeah. I want to see it, but you know what? We could bring it to the full board, and if there's something there we don't like, we could address it. Or deny it. Not that I see that happening, but potential's there.
Then we could send it out today. Or
It
review.
would move us 1 month faster. What's 1 month? Well, on one hand, it's quite a bit potentially.
We need a motion then.
If that's what the committee thinks we should do, I guess.
I'll make a motion that we can move it quicker. We can send it out today. We can get the review of it.
So your motion would be have to be to bring it to the full board for the December meeting.
Yes,
That's your motion. I'll
motion to
second
bring it to the board in December.
In discussion, Chairman Mike, is that your recommendation as well? If this roll as soon as possible?
There's a motion and a second. Okay. Is there any other discussion with it? We're gonna get it out. We all have a chance to look at it. Before it comes-
I was just,
I just want to know if it was JD wanted to add anything or not, but,
No, it wasn't her.
oh, okay,
Somebody else has joined the meeting.
okay. So do we vote with our clicker? Or-
Yep, I'm ready.
ready?
Okay, cast your vote.
So to be clear, this is item 13.
13,
Consider the investment policy bring to the full board.
full
I just
board.
didn't want to hear about it at the next meeting from somebody in the audience.
We're just waiting for Stacy.
Oh, sorry. That's common, sorry.
And we have all agreed as well. So
Okay, so motion carries. Thank you. I'd like to think that that's a good idea. All right, next item we have is item 16, closed session. Does anybody have anything that they want to bring up before we go to that? Okay. So, closed session, 2023 wage and collective bargaining update, discussion possible action pursuant Wisconsin statute 19.851E, deliberating or negotiating the purchase of public properties and investment of public funds or conducting other specific public business whenever the competitive or bargaining reason requires a closed session. In addition, the committee will be discussing collective bargaining strategy, thus excluding from the open session requirements under S 19.821. The motion from who?
I'll make that motion.
Motion by Ms. Hassel, second by Mr. Duffy to go to the closed session.
And the voting is open. Go ahead, click your vote. That has to be a roll call vote. And again, all ayes.
Motion carried unanimously. Thank you.
I was gonna use tweets and put no.
Mine doesn't work.
Hey, it's open. Again, 5-0.
Motion carries. Thank you. 17, the future agenda items. Ooh, we got a lot. But if anybody in the committee that thinks of something that, again, if they want something on the agenda, please bring it to Mike or Andy or I, and we can certainly put it on the agenda. Otherwise, we're gonna have a lot of stuff on the agenda again next month. Okay?
Chairman, I wouldn't forget about that investment portion. I mean, I know we're gonna approve it this month, but it should be there so these people can address it.
Investment
Make
update.
sure and give Mike directive on what to do with it.
It'll be a learning process, but we'll make the best decisions we can with the information we have at the time.
To clarify, you want items for the agenda going just to you, so we're not borrowing these two, because otherwise it could be,
Then it needs to go there. If you give it to me, I'm gonna give it to them anyway.
Yeah.
So
I just didn't know if it should be one point of contact or,
3,
okay, perfect.
okay? All right, correspondence. Does anybody have any correspondence conferences? If not, meeting's adjourned. Thank you for your valuable time.
Thank you.
Thank you.